Hi everyone, I'm Prosecutor Pete Lucido, and I'm here today with my Chief of the Domestic Violence Unit for Felonies, Elizabeth Abbo. And Elizabeth, welcome. We got a lot to talk about today, including what is a domestic violence felony, what are the type of penalties associated with domestic violence penalties, what is a place that they can seek counseling and or help after they've been a victim. Is there a victim advocate that works with these individuals? So let's just get rolling and get started right away.
Sounds good.
Good. So tell us what you do as a chief on your day-to-day in the domestic violence felony unit.
Well, the domestic violence felony unit is a very busy unit. We handle authorizing warrants from misdemeanors, which are low-level crimes, jailable less than a year, maximum penalty, to felonies all the way up through to homicides. We review whatever warrants come in on a daily basis. If they're in custody, they're handled immediately. If they're not, they're handled within a day or so. Aside from that, we go to court every day and we file these matters and handle them from the bottom to the top. We take them from the very beginning phases all the way up through to completion up at circuit court if they are felonies. We have a lot of contact with the police officers and a lot of contact with the victims to help them through this process and keep them encouraged and strong enough to continue to pursue and support the prosecution of the felony crimes.
There's victim advocates that are there to assist victims that are subject to domestic violence. Tell us what those advocates do for the victims that you represent.
The advocates play a very important role because we are not always accessible as the attorneys. We're very busy in court, reviewing documents and requests for warrants. So the victim advocates are there to explain the court process to the victims so they're less intimidated and understand when they need to appear and when they don't. They explain the resources to victims, whether it be referrals for alternate housing. A lot of them get displaced due to domestic violence, counseling services, other support services if need be, and they update the victims on the court process and what has occurred if the victim's not able to attend that court proceeding if they're not required to.
So as an attorney and also a chief of a unit, you've got a dual role. You're looking out for those that work under you in the unit, also that you break up, I would assume, the territory of Macomb County from the south to the north or from the east to the west so that you have a caseload. Approximately how many members in your unit that handle felony domestic violence? And that would be for males, females, and or youth. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
How many caseloads do you have?
The unit itself has over 300 open, active felony cases. There's probably more than that of the misdemeanors, the lower level crimes that we authorize, and those are handled in the court by the general unit. So there's 3 of us in the unit right now. We're hoping to add to that if possible.
Hold on.
And yes, we have over 300 cases each.
Yeah.
There at one point was 9 homicides just in the felony domestic violence unit. Those higher level crimes we like to all work on together. 3 brains are better than 1,
yes.
And that helps keep things moving along in a stronger presence when the case is presented in court.
We've seen a spike in domestic violence here in Macomb County. We're a population of less than 1 million people. We also know that a lot of these cases are dealing with some of the, let's say, spouses, some of the partners that are involved. These domestic violence, what causes somebody to go ahead and intentionally hurt somebody causing a domestic violence? What do you normally see as the main reasons these are occurring?
We see a lot of repetitive behavior. A lot of times people have experienced it in their home as youths and then continue. The inability to control frustration is a lot of it. The court almost always orders anger management, batterers counseling, substance abuse treatment. A lot of these are springboarded off of instability for other reasons, whether it be financial, the history within the family, substance abuse as well as that. We have seen an increase in the number of domestic violence cases, and in my opinion, the level of aggression in the domestic violence cases as well, wherein they rapidly increase from emotional, social abuse to pushing, shoving to weapons, and then the homicides that we end up with. So,
tell me, in regards to the unreported, because we know it's out there, why is it critical at the onset to report, and how many of those cases that you have didn't report out of the gate, which means let the spouse or let the partner go and give them a pass? Explain all that.
And a lot of times we end up with high-level assault felony cases and have a long history described behind that. There's police reports that are made and victims then fail to appear. It's a major life change to step forward and stop this from happening in someone's life. Sometimes they're displaced from their homes. Financially, there's stressors. There's children involved quite frequently between the parties. And there's life intimidation itself to not appear and process what's happening.
And I've heard you over and over say, you know what? They tell them, give them another chance. They didn't really mean it. They want to make this up to them. It will never happen again. Every excuse imaginable, and then they're right back into it again. And sometimes they felt hopeless, not having someplace to go, having the wherewithal, the means, not knowing where to go. If somebody has a domestic violence, what in their family or with their partner, what should they do? What is it that you would recommend for people out there?
I think when we try to understand the social isolation also that starts happening very quickly through emotional manipulation and things like that, people need to reach out, whether it's to law enforcement, to family, to counselors, to friends, to teachers at school, and let somebody else know what's going on. And a lot of times I see that gives people the strength to move forward as they should and to stop this process. There's always hope, I think, with victims that when they're told it's not going to continue, that they want to believe that and maintain this relationship and family and house and hope that that change is going to be there. We do see, though, without treatment or addressing those underlying needs, that they generally don't stop the pattern of lack of anger management and continues to get worse and worse, and then the victim feels trapped.
To get them to come to court, I know that there's probably a lot of influence that a victim is enduring during the period of time from the arrest till actually the court proceedings. And they hear from either the person that actually committed the crime itself, if there's a no contact order in place, if there is and violations of those that occur, but they go through third parties to tell them, don't show up for court and this and that. What do you recommend to those victims when they hear that from somebody who's been charged?
I would say to reach out. Again, communication keeps things in the right loop, I would say. We talk to victims a lot and encourage them to memorialize those communications, cut off communications with people that are bullying them, to not follow through with that. I personally feel that reaching out and getting in contact with these victims as quickly as possible from our unit keeps them fortified and strong to continue the process, because they do get pushed around or bullied to not prosecute and continue to follow through.
Must take a lot of courage and confidence to go ahead knowing the person that you have a child with, or that you have a partnership with, that you've got to go against them and basically turn them in for something that you could not control and they didn't control themselves. Any recommendation on that? Because that's a hard thing to do, to call 911 and said, I need to report this. I can't take this no more.
It is a hard thing to do, and I see that a lot of victims aren't in counseling when things begin. We always encourage that to get started, and I hate to go back to say the same thing again, but always having someone else in your corner makes this an easier and a better process, and they tend to follow through better when we have parents of the victims or friends and family members that are helping them through that. But that 911 call definitely gets police there, and they always refer it to our office to look at it and see if it's appropriate, and then we reach out as much and as quickly as we can, and the victim advocates get them into and counseling.
That's critical to get early intervention so that they have somebody to talk to who will guide them through the process of healing.
It's almost a vacuum. They get pulled in and need somebody to help keep them at the front of that to not get sucked right back in and
so continue. It's an emotional unit too, because you're dealing with first and foremost somebody who has been abused, somebody who has had a violent act occur to them, and the entire family sometimes is not there to be supportive. So it's kind of you, the victim advocate. You're supposed to be making sure that justice is served. The victim advocate is telling the individual where to go to get help, who to use as a support group, how can you come out of this and at least start to realize that there will be closure somehow and be able to live a normal life.
Right.
Very difficult. I noticed that you have with you, and I want to show everybody, the domestic violence. It's a pamphlet, and it's things that you need to know, and it's to help. Tell us a little bit why you designed and put together this pamphlet for the individuals that you serve.
You know, the pamphlet is good in that it covers things that may not be recognized as domestic violence, and I think that's important with the youth to let them know what is domestic violence, even if it's just verbal and it hasn't started to be physical yet. There's a lot of control and a lot of things that occur with that. There's resources in here. The cycle of violence and the pattern is discussed in this pamphlet, and I think that the basics of the concerns that maybe stop people from being able to have the strength to come forward or to know where to go helps identify what is domestic violence, what are the resources and what can happen, and please don't hesitate to contact law enforcement.
You and I have had a lot of discussions. These are conveniently located in the police departments. They can pick them up in libraries. We've put them out for the public at large. These things can be asked for by calling our office at the Macomb County Prosecutor's Office and requesting a pamphlet. The victim advocates always give these pamphlets to the individuals that are victims of the violence. But also, what's the need to get into the schools and talk about this to our youth when they're young, when they are more adept to understand what is domestic violence and how it can be avoided? Explain that to everybody.
And of course, we have a whole juvenile unit that charges the children when they commit domestic violence themselves as well, but we obviously see that as victims within our unit, and I think there's been an increase actually in the level of assaultive crimes within the juveniles as well. It's the pattern and the lifestyle, and if people don't realize early on, or they do realize early on what constitutes domestic violence, that it's not just being punched by somebody or being assaulted with a weapon. It comes to control, not seeing family members, not having your phone when you want to have your phone, being told this, being told that, minimized as a person, that those are flags that we need to look for. And at that point, if we can empower the kids to recognize what the early on phases of domestic violence is, then hope that some intervention can happen by that person themselves or just recognizing it within a household.
You know, in regards to our laws, the legislature have duty to report, and there's actually mandate reporting agencies such as school teachers, maybe coaches that are out there in the schools, some of the other counselors that are in the schools, medical professionals that are there for us when we receive treatment in a medical facility. But when you're an adult and you've been beat up or you've been bruised or you've been battered around, you've got to take your own initiative. No one else is there for you. Like at school, those teenagers that can go to a guidance counselor and said, you know, I've been beat up, or my mother has been beat up, or my dad's been beat up, and talk about the issue so that somebody has a familiarity of what's happening in that household. And that may affect them psychologically, their grades. It could affect them in all different ways. And the only way to get help is to tell people I need the help, correct? Any suggestions you can give to the students that are in school that witness this back at home, or that they are themselves a victim to domestic violence?
It's especially difficult, I think, for the younger people, right? It's hard enough for the adults to come forward and say, I'm in a situation I shouldn't be in, let alone the kids. If there's any trusted person where someone feels confident to speak to someone, that they'll keep their confidence and get them help in the right fashion. There's such a relay that happens once someone finds out appropriately, especially if it's a child, to start that process and get help and get people to start looking into that situation. Thankfully, at the schools, people recognize signs of abuse and will report that themselves as they're mandated. They don't have a choice to make the decision as to whether it was from abuse or not. Somebody else will look into that. It's difficult. I think I've seen a lot of difficulty with the youths reporting things that they're watching in their household that they're not actually victims of. They don't feel like they have control over their parents or that household situation, but the school counselors and the teachers, I think, are critical in getting an understanding from the kids what they're living with and how grades might be dropping because of something mom and dad are going through. That's probably the most difficult thing to come forward with, is kids reporting, look, my parents have domestic violence.
Other than anxieties, maybe drugs, alcohol, maybe medications that are not corrected properly, any other things that are out there that make somebody do something to extremes to hurt another person?
Sometimes that's in their history too. The criminal histories can be long with people that will take that extra step to abusing someone. So once finances are out of control, that adds to stressors, whatever life stressors might be. They're in every way, shape, and form and different for each person, whereas I might not see it as a life stressor. Somebody else's reaction might be in anger and out of control and that of violence. So it's across the board in many ways, shapes, and forms.
Well, I appreciate you giving us your insight. I appreciate your leadership in governing that unit, because there's a lot of crimes out there that you've brought into the office as far as what's going on in Macomb County. And I don't think it's just here. I don't think it's just an isolated county. I think this is in all 83 counties throughout the state. So I want to thank you for your leadership role in being the chief and overseeing this and dealing with law enforcement officials, and more importantly, getting to the root of the problem so that we can stop domestic violence in Macomb County and hopefully the rest of the state. Thanks for taking the time out. I appreciate what you do every day. And if anybody has any questions for Elizabeth or her unit, or even in general, call the Macomb County Prosecutor's Office, ask for the chief of the Domestic Violence Felony Unit. They're more than happy to assist, and if they can't, they'll find somebody who can, especially if you're going through tough times.
Absolutely.
Thanks for being with us today, and we look forward to hearing from you. But education is the best process. Make sure that we can get into your schools or into your community and be able to speak what we know we can do, and that's to help. So thanks again.
Absolutely, it's a pleasure.